Imagine a world where more women have the time to fully explore their genius. Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the UK's podcast for women leaders and founders ready to unlearn conventional rules and lead their businesses of significance. Hailed for counter-status quo ideas and a whole dose of feminine perspective, this is our International Women's Day series, sponsored by our headline partners, NatWest. My name's Lulu Minns. I host retreats and create spaces for women leaders to explore their genius. And today, I'm going to create that same space right here for you on this podcast. Welcome to episode 108 of She Rebel Radio, Embrace 2023. Welcome to our well-renowned International Women's Day 2023 series. We are beyond excited to be embracing equity. Women in business are on the rise. This is our time and you are totally in the right place. Now, to embrace, which is the theme for International Women's Day this year, means to willingly and enthusiastically accept, adopt and espouse. It's a very feminine based word, which we're going to explore more about that. But guess what? We have 10 brand new spanking episodes for you, and each of our fabulous guests coming up are going to be embracing a particular topic that is relevant to their expertise and sharing with you also what they are going to be embracing this year, both personally and business-wise. And guess what? As this series is being sponsored by our fabulous partners at NatWest following the Rose Review and their commitment to supporting female founders, we have 6 of the top 100 female founders as shared and celebrated by NatWest and The Telegraph at the back end of 2022, including some in their commendation list, which is the top 10, and the number 1 exceptional founder is joining us on International Women's Day itself. I understand Erin is also going to be sending me something in the post, which I'm very excited about. So I'll be sharing on socials about that on International Women's Day. Now, this list shines a light on female-led businesses here in the UK, which despite the economic times we are facing, are being started now more than ever. Luke from NatWest is going to be joining us at the end of the series to share more with us about that and updates from the Rose Review. Now, I was going to kick this series off as a solo, but decided, following co-hosting a She Rebel Radio and NatWest Women in Business event earlier last week, I'd invite Jo Darling, the founder of Menopoised, who joined me on the panel at the event, to join me today so we can spin off some energy on what to expect from 2023. Jo, how are you doing?
Not so bad today, Lulu. Thank you. It's Friday and the incense is burning.
Yes. Absolutely. Now, can you give us a quick intro? I know you are a woman who is more than capable of introducing herself. So tell us a bit about you and what you do.
So I'm Jo Darling. I'm an acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner. I say that because Chinese medicine is much more than just acupuncture. I am also the founder of Menopoised, which are acupuncture-inspired products for menopause, which grew out of my practice treating women going through cancer. So I'm absolutely passionate about women's health, about helping people particularly to go through the menopause transition naturally, but actually at any stage. I'm really focused on hormones because they just have such a huge impact on our bodies. So working with women to help them help themselves really naturally, it's a huge part of what I do, self-care advocate as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And you had a previous life. Were you a broker?
I was a money broker straight after I came out of my degree, and I went to London. I was supposed to meet a friend and they let me down. So I met someone else and strolled into the broking room, and all the the brokers looked at me. Little did I know what they were doing with, the gesticulating with the hands. Couldn't understand it, but I do now. And they just let a woman go. And I think it was just so fortuitous for them. They needed to have a sort of quotient of women, which was, let's put it this way, one. That they were like, oh, she's got some balls. Let's bring her in and break her. So yeah, I did money broking for a few years, but it did in the end break me. And I didn't used to talk about that, but I do now because I think it's so important that people can look at you and go, blimey, I would never imagine you'd been a money broker, and B, that you would break. But we all have the capacity to break, and we all have the capacity to heal and regrow and come back stronger. So it's something that I'm always happy to share with people.
Yeah.
And through that, I then went traveling, and then I got into marketing. So I've worked probably 10 or 15 years in the marketing world, mostly in TV and radio. So
Yeah, amazing. I was
um,
going to say, and you are a self-professed healer, and you were with us on the panel at
I
the
was.
She Rebel Radio and NatWest, which was amazing. How was the event for you?
I was blown away. I mean, I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for in a way. I rocked up thinking there'd be about 10 people. When I got to the door and saw like 4 A4 pages of names, and there was over 100 people signed up, I was a bit like, right, okay, what's going on here? But as you can probably tell from the way I talk, I'm fairly comfortable talking, and yeah, everybody there was amazing. The people in the audience were fabulous. All women entrepreneurs. If they hadn't started, they were starting. All walks of types. It was just wonderful, and the panel as well. Wow, you did really well. What a lovely group of women. I felt like I was quite different from the others, but as we said, underneath it all, there was a really strong running theme of. Well, I felt like we were all taboo busting.
Yeah,
Um, passionate about our thing. So yeah, no, it
yeah.
was a really great event, and NatWest have backed me in the past, so always happy to support NatWest as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, it was real coming together for me as well. Seeing 5 of you on the panel and all the incredible women there, many who hadn't necessarily heard of She Rebel Radio that have become fans, which was
No,
amazing.
that's great.
Yeah, and just seeing you all sharing. And I was like, yeah, I've got a panel of She Rebels, like right
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
sharing,
and you, I thought you handled it wonderfully as well. There were times when I was just, I mean, it could have, particularly when it's women, we could have talked for England, but you were really good at keeping us on brief and taking us through the exercise, the way. I loved the way, just a quick compliment to you. I loved the way that you phrased the questions, and then it was all the hierarchical things that, not hierarchical, but the things that the phases and things you go through. So
yeah.
the women that were there got some wonderful, not just, it wasn't just interesting chat, they got some real good work from it as well, didn't they? I thought very
Yeah,
good.
brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Joe. As you know, I lead quite intuitively, so I
Yeah,
kind of never
yeah,
quite know what I'm going to do.
yeah,
And
it
I'm
was great.
always, yeah, brilliant and prepared to rip up the plan. But yeah, I thought we could kind of like interweave a bit of workshopping with the panel, and
Yeah,
I feel
well,
like it
brilliantly like
worked.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
amazing to have you. Now, I love the vibes of spring, so it makes me even more excited when International Women's Day is coming around because, energy is rising from the east, and I know you are way into the seasons and stuff as well and Chinese medicine. So, what can we do to emerge into spring? I think you had an event last night, which unfortunately,
I did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was fascinating, and I learned quite a bit from the event in terms of, I called it emerging into spring. Actually, what I should have called it was how to look after your liver, and I think probably more people would have understood what was in it for them.
Mm.
So what's wonderful about Chinese medicine is we take our cues from nature. So we just look around us and see what's happening, and then we are energetically, we're not separate from the rest of the world. So if you look what's happening in nature, it's also what's happening in us. So in winter, we hibernate, we grow deep roots. We need to eat plenty of food to sustain ourselves because it's cold. In spring, look at those seeds coming through. What a lot of work they've done over winter to then bust through. They're so tiny, they bust through the earth like that. And that's actually what we are trying to do as human
Mm.
beings as well. And it's hard work, but there's lots of things that, come with that. So just a really small thing that I was talking about last night was, in winter we eat a lot of food, in spring we naturally don't eat so much, and so women often worry about their weight and things. This is
Yeah.
all things that if we just live naturally, we're going to go in line with those things. So it's looking at the correspondences in Chinese medicine. So spring relates to the east, it relates to the color green, it relates to the organs of the liver and the gallbladder, it relates to the eyes, to tears, to sight, all those different things. And you could go on. The correspondences are huge. But for me, the key thing was to talk about the liver and the gallbladder and how we can take care of them. And
Mm.
there's kind of, we have this thing called yang sheng in Chinese medicine, which translates to the nourishment of life. It's how to cultivate life, how to live well and live long. And it's all, again, taking cues from nature and, living as we were meant to live. So I focused on, like this is last night, focused
Yeah.
on kind of 4 areas of things. So One would be the type of food that you eat. So it's quite good to eat young sprouting food because that is the energy of the time.
Hmm.
Sour food can often be really helpful. So I'm talking lemons, limes, that kind of thing. Apple cider vinegar before you eat is also really good, but not too much sour because you can also affect the liver. So in eating light, not eating too late. That was food, and then movement. You'll love this because I know you're a yogini as well.
Yeah.
The liver, and I've just learned this thing called meridian stretching, which I'm absolutely in love with because it makes so much sense to me. I'm quite a livery, woody kind of person, so all of this stuff I'm saying to you is all stuff that I do myself.
Yeah.
The liver meridian, just as one example, runs on the inside of the thighs. So if you do any kind of wide legs stance in yoga to stretch the inside of the thighs, you are supporting your liver energy. And
Yeah.
so you may have seen this at yoga and your yoga retreats. Sometimes, I know certainly my first one was such an intense experience. I spent a lot of the time crying because it was just this massive release of stagnation, which is what you get when the liver's out of balance. And
Yeah.
that is from stretching the muscles and the tendons, which also relate to the liver, and releasing the energy in that area. So stretching, inner thigh stretching, and I'm doing it as I talk,
Yes,
stretching
that's
the
the
sides of,
movement part.
stretching the sides of the body is also really important. And then sleep, really important. So liver and gallbladder are strongest between 11 and 3 in the morning. So if you're waking around any of those times, you've got liver gallbladder imbalance.
Oh
And so
wow, really?
trying to get to sleep before 11 o'clock. So trying to get, go off to sleep around 10:30.
Yeah, I'm such a
Um,
10 p.m. girl. Like whatever I'm
so
doing,
am
I
I.
start to drop.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of us are as we get older, and a lot
Yeah.
of women that come into clinic are like, oh, I go to bed really. I'm like, that's great, mate. That's really great. Do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
start getting twitchy about 9:30 of like,
yeah,
oh,
exactly
gotta be
that.
done.
Exactly. And the reason for that is that the liver is cleansing and nourishing us and it's storing our blood, which is really important for us as women. And it needs to do all that at a time of rest. It can't do it if you're awake and out dancing. So, sleeping is really important. And then the last part of it, which I don't give so much advice about, I just bring awareness to, is the psychological aspects of the liver and the gallbladder, which
Hmm.
can either come from like stagnation, things not moving freely, and that's frustration and resentment and those kind of feelings, or from this stagnation getting stronger and stronger and eventually creating heat, which ends up in these huge like rages and like whooshes of emotion. And if the liver and the gallbladder aren't in balance, you could talk for hours about the psychological aspects of it, but
Yeah.
the things you can do are kind of reduce your stress. And I hate it when I say that because it sounds so glib, doesn't it? Okay, I'm stressed. How do I reduce it? And for me, that's working with people like you because you can help,
Yeah, absolutely.
allow
And
people the
although I'm a
space to
little bit
see.
disappointed, spring is not the time for dancing. Well, certainly not at midnight, but we can do it
Oh,
at midday.
no, dance anytime you like. Dancing is great for the heart, great for joy. And so, no, I just don't advocate it at 1 o'clock in the morning when you should be resting. But
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
in moderation, Lulu, including moderation. So perhaps
yeah,
if you
exactly.
need to do it.
Yeah, and as you say, particularly when we get older, it's the clubbing days are done. But so within that, 2023 is also the year
Mm,
of the rabbit in Chinese
yes,
medicine. How does that differ from
yes.
last year?
Well, so last year was the year of the tiger. Both years are water years, which
Lots of
is
emotion.
interesting. Yeah, lots of emotion, lots of inner, looking inward. But the sort of feature of the year is more about the animals and the features of the animals. And it's really simple in terms of what's the difference between a tiger and a rabbit. Don't pull the tiger's tail. And we saw that really come to fruition last year with things like the war in Ukraine. Tigers will be aggressive if they need to be. I mean, I'm sure they're not aggressive all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas this year is a rabbit, and you just have to, rabbits are more like to thump, aren't they? To warn, but they're not
Hmm.
they're not known for their aggression. They are the hunted. So it's very different. Last year was quite a yang year. This year is very, very yin, and yin is more female, and that's a more gentler energy. It's not to say that there won't be disagreements. It's just that they're not going to be quite as vicious as last year. And I love that. It's just lovely to think that we're coming into a calmer possibly a calmer time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not all roses, but it is calmer.
It's going to be calm. And as you said, a feminine year. And I love that, this year for International Women's Day, embracing equity. I find embrace a very feminine based word as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I suppose it is in a way. I'd not really thought about that before.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
that's why I
is,
was like, I'm
isn't it?
totally going to jump on that word for this series. Like, how can we embrace the embracing and the real feminine energy? So, and also
Yeah.
a rabbit is quite spring like. We associate, little
Yes.
bunny rabbits as well with spring.
Yes.
We kind of expect a lot of that spring energy over this year of the seeds,
That's right.
pushing through. There's a bit of energy that we need.
Yeah, it continues throughout the year, and that's why the event that I hosted about spring was probably more important than any of the others I will host about the different parts of the year, because this energy is going to filter on. So there is going to be possibly, think about rabbits. They stop and they start, don't they? They watch, they're alert, but then they stop and then they run. So it's going to have all of that energy. But spring energy isn't for everybody, so you're going to need to pace yourself
Yeah.
rather than keep pushing on through. So yeah, it really is a time to take care and take note. Be like a rabbit. I mean, love like a rabbit as well. That's that comes in. It's a passionate year, but not necessarily, in a relationship sexual way. It's a time to really foster relationships and friendships and be passionate in those relationships. So it's
Yeah.
every aspect of the rabbit. The rabbit signifies wood and signifies spring as well.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
yeah,
Love like a rabbit. You heard it here first on She Rebel
love like a
Radio.
rabbit. We could really take that into a different road, couldn't we? But let's not.
We could take that into so many roads. But also, is there spring is also associated, with the four phases of feminine, as I call it, with the maiden energy. So, is there kind of an
Mm,
innocence and, kind of an innocent and childlike energy to spring as well? Because it's the kind of young
yeah.
energy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the way I always think, it's interesting that you say that, because whenever I think of spring, I always see the seed emerging from the ground. So it's the start of things.
Yeah,
And this Chinese New Year starts usually, didn't this year, it's a week apart, but usually starts at the same time as spring starts, slightly earlier than we would in the West. But it
yeah,
is because of that, it's this fresh new energy that's coming through. As I say, ride it, I reckon, because it can be challenging and you've got to be ready for it. And that's one of the other reasons why talking about the seasons and preparing and self-caring for the seasons, you need to prepare for spring in winter and you need to prepare for summer in spring. The other
yeah,
thing I thought about with spring that was interesting too is that it's a shoulder season, isn't it? Along with autumn, it's an equinox. It's about equality in a way, because
yeah.
it's the
The
time when
equal
things
day
are
and night.
equal. Exactly. Whereas in, solstices, the winter and the summer, these are the abundant times of peak. So it's the time of balance, and that's why it's such an important time to take ourselves through that transition.
Yeah, and that's why spring and autumn are my favourites, because I'm a Libra. I'm all about
Oh,
balance. I need
you
the
are.
equilibrium, if I can put my teeth back in. Yeah, and transition, and that's what I do. As a job as well, is that transitional
Yes.
space. I actually love those transitional spaces,
Yeah,
and
they're grand.
also just when we were talking there, what came up for me as well is vulnerability. That there's a degree of vulnerability this year, perhaps as well, with that kind of
Yeah,
spring-like innocence.
I think there is vulnerability, and I haven't really explained, but I do Baptiste chart readings. So that means it's like Chinese astrology. And actually, my acupuncture practice is based on the foundations of that. I didn't do it deliberately. It was just something, it was the nearest college. And it turns out that it's something that I'm actually really growing into and really loving. So I'm now doing health readings for people. So helping them really understand themselves a little bit more deeply so that they can take care of themselves more uniquely in a personalized way. But
Nice.
the thing about Butser is, so it's this chart, and in its essence, it's a container of energy. And so the reason we know we can talk about the energy of this year is because this year has its own pillar and its own column of energy. And then you match that column of energy with your own column of energy, and then you see, okay, this is where maybe these things might be better for me to do, or I need to watch out for this particular thing. And it really works. I kind of giggle as I
Mm.
say it because it seems like nuts sometimes, but it really is. And what is coming through the Boxer chart for the year is that this year is it's not going to be necessarily an easy path, and we're already seeing, because things don't happen, and there's no cut off like this and this, like you say, transition, and we emerge into things. But there will, it is a year of inflation. That is be seen really clearly in the charts. And it's possibly a year where people burn out as well, which is why, no surprise, we were saying about, it's a kind of a spring energy on spring energy. So pace is really, really, really key. Making sure that you manage yourself and don't get too carried away.
Yeah, I often say, and I think way back when there was a She Rebel radio episode on it, contraction is the key to expansion. Contraction being the feminine energy, whereas expansion being the masculine energy. But we need the balance of both. So maybe that's a real reminder of this year. Of remember, the contraction and the stepping back is so important.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that entirely.
And how does how's this year? Any insights on kind of next year?
Well, it's a really exciting year this year. The Bart's people are just full of themselves at the moment, because we have cycles of 9-year periods, and each period is 20 years. So the last time we had this particular energy was a really massive time of change and upheaval. It was 1963, massive transition year. JFK was murdered. Luther King did his I Have a Dream speech. It was a huge year. So it's that kind of energy coming again. And the general the thing that I'm really holding on to and I really love is that there's lots of opportunities for people in terms of wealth. And I don't mean that just financially. I mean, wealth and well-being. And it's because it's a feminine year, it's all about women. And so, as I understand it, this is a really good year for women in business. As I mentioned, so we're coming to the end of this particular period of 20 years in 2023. As we head to 2024, we start a brand new period of 20 years, but it's period 9. So it's the last period of 20 years before we head back round again. So we're coming to a real ending. Yeah. And what the chart is telling us this year is that we need to be prepared. So this is a year of preparation, that success comes when you're solving problems, but it's got to be solving a problem with your own talent. So a couple of years ago, it was the right time for people who didn't necessarily have talent. You just copied other people, and the same thing was being trotted out everywhere.
Yeah.
Now what's happening is it's your unique talent. And actually, my teacher was talking about it. One of the things she was saying was like, if you're working from home and you're not actually working, this is the year you're going to get found out. So you need to be authentic, because you will be seen through in a way that you haven't before. It's about being the right person with the right skill and knowing what you want to do. So it's the rise of the small businesses. It's a rise in women's energy within that field. And just you need to look quite closely. If you think the symbolism for this year is like a misty plant that from a distance just looks like it's in mist and a bit murky, but when you get up close and you look at the leaf, there's lots of wonderful droplets of water on there. So look deeply to find what you need, and don't dismiss something just because it looks a bit murky from the outside. You need to be fully engaged and really looking in deep. Some people are going to get stuck with progress this year, and if you're asking where you need to be going, it's kind of like the news is, it might be a bit late for that. So you need to really figure it out and know what it is that you want. Be solving a problem, and be authentic. And I think they would be the key things to say. So this is a preparation year in terms of we're going into this new period, which will bring new opportunities next year.
Yeah, I'm loving all of this, Joan. It really, really resonates. I've been feeling, quite a while, like there's lots of endings and things ending and a new energy, but almost I call it no woman's land as well, that kind of in between.
Yeah. I love that. I always put the woe in front of the man.
Pardon?
I always put the woe in front of the man.
Yes, exactly. But then loving, the depth of everything, and as we were talking about it at the event with Nat West and She Rebel Radio of what's our genius. Like there's a real falling and pull to doing that, and actually I feel like if you're not going to step into that, things are going to get really hard for you, because that's the encouragement, that's the push energetically. definitely.
Yeah, stepping into your genius. And I know I can really appreciate that sometimes it is hard to know what that is. And I struggled a bit with that question. And one of the things that I said, and I'd really love to share with people, is that when I first started Menopoised, which, as I said, is acupuncture inspired products, I didn't even want to talk about acupuncture. At the time, I was working with someone who said to me, you'll know more about this than I do, Lulu, but the Brené Brown thing about going into the stage, into this arena.
Yeah,
And she was like, and only take note of the people who are there fighting with you, not the people who are sort of the
on the
naysayers.
sidelines.
Yeah, exactly. But we were talking about getting me into the arena, and it's like at points I couldn't even put my handle on the door to turn it to walk into the arena. And I
Yeah,
was adamant I wasn't going to talk about acupuncture and I wasn't going to talk about Chinese medicine because people weren't going to take it seriously because of the culture that we live in. But now I couldn't be more proud because there's no other way of explaining how it all works than
yeah,
that. And the fact that I've seen it work and I get the feedback that it's changed people's lives makes me go, oh, okay, yeah, I can step into this. So, okay, a little bit of external validation going on there, but it's been a process for me to sort of stand up and say who I am. And not that I've never been authentic, I've always been authentic, but just worried,
yeah.
too
Same
worried,
here in
too
terms of,
worried.
yeah, talking about feminine based energy and the
Mm.
rise of the feminine.
Oh,
And now it's something that we can talk about in a little bit more of a mainstream way. But and it's funny, isn't it? Because when you look back, you're like, I wish I'd been bolder about that, because
yeah.
I was talking about systems and structures collapsing like 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm like, why?
Wow.
Why didn't I? Why wasn't I
Wow.
bolder? Because and then what we've seen over the last few years, I'm like, wow, like I didn't
Wow.
even kind of feel that, but I
Yeah.
did. That's what I was talking about, but only to people that really followed me and what it is that I do and talk about. So it's really
But
good to
that's
have
it.
this
But that's
conversation.
also really important, isn't it? I remember at the beginning of the menopause journey, talking about who we would reach and who we would talk to and everything. And it's like actually far better to be engaged with a few people who really get what you're talking about than to try and, with this crazy world we live in with social media ruling everything. And quite frankly, Mark Zuckerman is bloody dictating who's going to look at my posts, and that's just not okay.
Yeah,
I look at social media and some of the people that I follow and I know would have got hundreds of likes and loads of comments. They're getting, such a small amount. And I hate the fact that it's not because what they're saying isn't interesting, useful, authentic. It's because an algorithm somewhere is knocking them away from me. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
but
Definitely the control there.
yeah, but I think it's definitely finding your authenticity and your power, and trusting your intuition, Lulu. That's the other thing that I'm learning. That you can call it what you like. We did a little bit of image work last night. I had a good friend of mine, Henny Flynn, who's a compassionate, she's a self-compassion coach type thing. We did
Yeah.
some image work, and that was all about uh, looking at yourself and I can't remember what I was going to say now, but it was something along those lines. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
about
no,
make
it all
it was
sounds good. But
it,
before we wrap up, because I know
yes,
you've got appointments and things like that.
yep.
What three things are you going to be embracing this year?
Well, fantastically, it came out of the image work that I did last night. I'm going to be massively embracing self-care, um, being extraordinarily mindful, like of not packing everything in. I had to do some work where I looked at how the end of spring would be if I'd had a bad time and how the end of spring would be if I'd had a good time. The bad time, I was dressed like Tony Basil, for those who remember her. Oh, Mickey, you're so fine. In my back garden with pigtails, jumping up and down, screaming and shouting, and really angry. And in the good end of spring, I was sat on my neighbour's front doorstep drinking tea, wearing clothes that I would normally wear, but I had such a relaxed look on my face, and I was just really calm and relaxed. And I had to say what the difference was between those two Joes, how I'd got that. And one was self-care, as I say, and the other was pace, because particularly I'm postmenopausal now. I always encourage people to talk about where they are in their bleed. I don't bleed anymore, just get that one in, shoehorn it in at the end. But I am more tired, I can't do as much as I used to. So thinking all the things I want to do, write a book, do this, do that, do the other. Actually, what's pushing you on to do that? Is it
Yeah,
necessary, and can you be happy doing other things? So self-care, pace, And I think let's add joy in there, doing the things that make you joyful, because after all, what's the point of being here? It's the journey, isn't it? It's not the destination. So more wakeboarding, Lulu. I'll see you down at the lagoon.
Yeah, love it. And I love the word pace as well, because I think
Yes,
that is a real strong message across the board for this year with, the energy and everything we've talked about. It's
totally.
pace.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
totally.
Amazing,
Yeah.
Joe. It's been amazing to have you. Where can we find you at Menopoised?
Oh, you can find me at Menopoised on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email me if you want to chat about anything. Joe at menopoised.co.uk. The website is menopoised.co.uk. And I do treat people virtually using acupuncture and oils, and I also do my Batsa health readings. So I would love to be able to support more people doing that. So just get in touch if you're interested.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us on She Rebel.
Pleasure. Go Rebels.
You've been listening to She Rebel Radio. We thank you for listening and thank our headline partners NatWest for sponsoring this series. If this episode has inspired you, please pass it on and share with at least one other incredible woman, and don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review. You can find out more about me and my work at luluminns.com or on most social media platforms.